All righty. Let's call the meeting to order. Do you want to do a roll call?
Yes, I do. Kathy Cavalier,
Present.
Tiffany DeMayo, present. Chris Wilson,
Present.
Bill Baker,
Present.
Donna McCall, absent. Frank Falcone.
Present. All right. Let's take a moment of silence, and then would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure will. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Can I motion that we approve the current agenda? It seems to be as expected. There's a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is approved. We do have guests today, so I don't know if you guys are,
Minutes.
you're saying they're out of order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public comment.
We never have public comment.
Do you want to comment? Are you here to comment on something on the agenda? Or are you here to just join us and watch or?
We're part of 3201 West Chester Pike.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then there'll be no public comment at the beginning. Can I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the March 11th meeting?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. And that takes us to the discussion regarding the demolition permit for 3201, which I was under the impression had been withdrawn. Is that correct?
Not withdrawn. I don't believe you guys are here to move forward with that.
We received a memo that it was with. So we kept it on the agenda just for discussion. Oh, okay.
I myself don't know.
If I can have you come up to the podium here and
Okay.
Well, then perhaps,
introduce yourself.
perhaps Heather was saying that we just didn't have additional paperwork to be added to our agenda.
Yes, when we received the email that it was taken, that the permit was withdrawn, I believe the people interested, which would be neighbors and so forth, were told not to, that they didn't have to come to this meeting because the permit was withdrawn for now. Not that it was going to hold, but that this meeting wouldn't be one where the owner would be here. So they were told not to come.
It was an email from, do you have any idea?
Township,
Newtown Township?
yes.
Why
have
don't
it.
you go ahead and discuss
Yes,
what
you
your
can still
desires are?
discuss it,
Okay.
Get
but
it on the record and then we'll go.
Can you start with your name, please?
My name is George Costello.
Thank you.
Again,
Anybody want to start?
So do you want to go ahead
I
and
think he
just
needs to.
tell them what you're wanting to do and where you're wanting to go forward at this point?
Yes. Right now, we're just trying to get to the bottom of whether the house is able to stay as is or get it torn down more or less. There's safety concerns from like inspectors from the township as well as engineers stating that it's not cost effective to fix it. There's pictures and other means of evidence that we can send to you guys. So you can see for your own eyes the condition of the property. The garages next door that were adjacent to the property, on the same property, were torn down just because of safety concerns as well. So that was the only thing that was really demolished, not attached to the house, separate garage parcel.
so is the plan just to clear the property for further development?
Yes.
I think the township's position, one way or another, there's an attached porch. I think we believe the attached porch needs to be removed, and even if the house is gonna stay, the attached porch is gonna have to be removed and replaced. It's in a condition that we do not think is safe. That's for sure on that. I don't know all the position on the inside of the house. I have not been in the house. I know that
Yep.
our inspector has, but I've not.
Okay.
In
And
fact,
I mean, I think,
Frank did a report.
say again?
Frank did an inspection.
Yeah, I think our take on it was that it, you know, clearly needs work, but it doesn't appear that the main structure is particularly unsavable.
You have to see the inside pictures.
Well, why don't we have Frank who did an inspection, so maybe you could address
I
that?
looked at the house.
Okay,
The outside walls are all masonry, and if you have a masonry problem, you have cracks in the walls. The porch is falling down, but the house itself is structurally sound. It's
Okay.
not falling down. I was a home inspector, give you a little background.
right.
I started working construction in 1961,
Mhm.
so I have a little bit of experience. I became a home inspector probably in 1988, but I was doing carpentry work all along. Structure is my strongest suit.
Okay.
There aren't any cracks in the outside walls that indicate there's any movement in the building itself.
I think there's just a lot of water damage inside. You have to really get through to see a lot of rot and other decay.
Did we see it?
If the rot I saw was on the outside, I didn't go inside.
Yeah, I know. I didn't blame me for going inside.
You know, other than general fact finding, since this isn't really on our agenda and we don't really have any documentation, I'm not sure how much we can do today as far as making a
Right.
decision.
I think the thing to understand for both parties, for your committee and for the Costales is that the process here is, you know, if they come in and they want to take the building down, they need to come before you. You have an opportunity to try to look for ways to potentially save the building, recommendations. If you can't come up with something that's feasible for them, there's basically a 90-day, what we call cooling off period, that during that 90 days, you know, you have an opportunity to try to look for ways to potentially save the building and do that, or at least come up with other alternatives. The one thing that I think that we have is that the township has said there's certain parts of the building that are unsafe, being that porch. And so the township, for the garage, we gave them the permit, said,
Was
go
gone.
take that down. First of all, we don't think that was historic.
Mm-mm.
The garage had no historic value. The porch, we think, was added afterwards as well. We again would argue that the porch should be removed for safety purposes even now. I understand from their point of view, they would rather do it all at one time if they're going to take it down for cost efficiency and those kind of things. And so, if what we need to figure out is where's the permit, and if we think it was removed, why you think it's not and why we think it is. So I just need to check with Andy and Heather and find out what happened. I think it was your contractor that pulled the permit, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Could have been.
So if the contractor pulls the permit, then there's no permit in. And so for us to move forward, we need the permit
Right.
refiled, and then we could officially put you on the agenda to start that 90-day process.
All right.
Okay?
Very good. Thank you.
That's kind of where I was going with it,
Yeah,
so that there's a chance for the neighbors to be notified.
yes,
Yeah, and
And
that's
there's a chance
what
for us
we
to
already
actually,
did, and that's
Yeah.
why we changed it.
yeah.
we'd have done a bit more homework if we thought it was gonna be up.
Yeah, is there
Yeah,
anything else you're wanting to? If we can forward you something. Yeah, if you
Can I
want
get
to
the
forward
booklet?
those. I'm gonna have you go back up to the mic if you're gonna have much of a conversation, just because people at home can't hear.
wait a minute.
I just wanted to forward you some pictures of the inside deterioration and so you can get a better understanding of the decay.
So if you want to go ahead and forward those to the township,
Yes,
get those to Heather. Heather will make sure that we get those on the agenda so that they all can see them
okay,
ahead of time.
yes.
And that way, when you come in with your permit, we'll have everything together.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I could have access to the house, look the inside, because I'm the one that's going to say what the inside's like anyway. No, yeah.
Sure.
I will get the other stuff.
If I have access, I can walk
Yeah.
to the house. I've inspected over 12,000.
Great.
So I have a little bit of experience. Houses. It
We went
was over 12.
down. No.
Yeah, you can stop by anytime soon.
Was somebody there?
But, you
Just
know,
go to Charlotte's.
I'm sure we're gonna be able to save it, but
Okay.
neighbors. won't.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, let's, so for the next meeting, what do we need to do to,
We need to find out the permit status in the interim, and if it's going to be on the agenda, Frank needs to have the inspection done first.
Frankel
Do that,
coordinated that?
and I can coordinate with you notify, when the permit is for demolition goes in, Steve, do they notify certain neighbors within a certain amount of?
I don't know that. I didn't think there was any notification of the neighbors. When you said that, I'm not 100% sure that's correct. I'd have to look.
I
I
can
know-
say that because I got calls when the garage went down, because I've been in contact with the neighbors. since
I
the
understand,
original.
but my
So
point
I
is,
didn't know how they,
And it
I don't think there's any requirement in the ordinance for the neighbors to be notified for a demolition permit. I think there's
So
a
in our code in
requirement,
general.
I think there's a requirement for making the property, making a zoning change because it's a zoning change. Now, I would argue that if we give a demolition permit, we probably need to change the zoning because now the location's probably no longer has the same historic value.
it would still be residential until they changed it, I assume.
Well, but right now we have, because you've
You would
taken
go-
the
you would have to-
action,
you would have to
it's
fund
also
it.
got the historic overlay piece on top, which what I would argue if the building eventually gets torn down, that would go away.
to the
So
ground.
our publication may be all the notification that's needed. The fact that it's on
That is
there.
correct.
Right.
But I'll check that with Heather. I'll review that with the attorney, make sure I'm not missing anything, but that's my understanding.
Well, if we know it's going to be on the agenda, we can certainly let word be passed around.
Sure.
Oh, I'm in contact with the neighbors. They want to be notified. I can assure you,
Because I
it
think
isn't
that,
necessarily the demolition. It's the results of it that are going to be utmost.
Well, and there are
I'll
two
bring them
different
in.
issues,
I
right?
mean, I
And
know that, but
So,
they're
I
gonna
mean,
wanna-
there's certain things they're allowed to do with the property as it is.
right.
And there's certain things they're not allowed to do. And so if they want to do something that's greater than what they're allowed to do, even with the demolition of the property, they would need to go either to,
Yep.
my guess is they're gonna have to go to the zoning hearing board and the planning commission, because my understanding is what they would like to do is do more than a single home on that property. And if they want to do more than a single home on that property, I think the property right now, maybe it is 2 lots, but it's not more than that. If it's If it's,
1.17 acres in
Yeah.
that neighborhood, that might
1.2.
be 3.
yeah,
Those
and
are
so
tiny,
it's
yeah.
potentially to be a more, I just can't remember.
The listed sale price, the listed offering price would indicate they want to take it commercial.
Yeah.
It says optional that they're
Yeah.
gonna do that. And I think neighbors also.
And I think that's probably always been the plan. I mean, they knew what the house was when they bought it.
Well, but the township has said that's a residential property. So for them to do something different, they would need to get
Right.
zoning relief in addition to going. So if they choose to divide the property and do more than one thing on the property, they will need to go to planning. If they want to do a commercial, they will have to go to the planning. And they would have to go to zoning because it's done residential.
Yep, and I think it's all easier if that house isn't there.
I don't think having the house there or not is gonna matter for that purpose.
It does from the marketing standpoint.
Well, it may for the marketing standpoint, but it doesn't change the process
Yeah.
of what they have to go through in order to move forward. And right now, it is listed as a residential, property.
Is it the only residential property on that stretch of?
It
Route
is, it is not the only residential property, it's the only property that's residential that I think currently does not have also commercial use on it. If I think I said that right.
Okay,
So I think there's several that are zoned residential have been converted to business.
there are
have been
quite, yeah, there are quite a few businesses and older houses there.
Yeah, and that's been done over time, and so they're grandfathered in. The argument that, just to kind of let you know, the argument would be if they chose to take us to court, which they might, there's probably a reasonable argument that if everything else is commercial, why wouldn't that be commercial? If every other use is commercial, why would commercial not be the potential use? The one thing about that particular lot, it's much deeper than the other lots that front West Chester Pike. So it may be one of those things that we would say, we would give towards the front half being commercial and the back part would be
Yeah, it's about the
residential.
same size as the Charlotte's lot,
Yes,
but everything else is
But
shallow.
Charlotte's
Yeah.
is parking lot,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah. And next across the street, Scott's, there's 2 houses across from where that backyard is alone,
Yeah.
opposite of it, so.
yeah, it's a very different,
Yeah.
it has a very different impact on the neighborhood,
Mhm.
which would be our argument from the township's standpoint.
Yeah, I think if they repurpose that building for the doctor's office or a lawyer's office, I think there would be a lot less fighting against it from the neighborhood, but I don't know.
So that's why it's not really, you can't really differentiate because they kind of go hand in hand. Because the neighbors know that by keeping that house there, they have somehow avoided the commercial rezoning possibly unless it's just for that building. But if they know that it can be demolished, their fears jump high. And so their goal would be to assist in maintaining it, and that's why they would come to a meeting like this. Because
Right,
they would want the building to stay, and if the argument is to knock it down, well, we
yeah,
know.
but
why
I
they
think,
want
I
to
think
do
you
that.
have to remember what is, I mean, even if 30 residents showed up and said, we would like the building to stay. Your role in the process is to look at the building itself and say, is it reasonable to salvage the building? If the building is not salvageable, even if it has historic value, you really have to, your role is not to turn around and try to save something for
No,
another
I think that,
purpose.
I don't think that that's what we're saying. I think that basically what you're saying is that the residents have some say because our process delays and delays, they have some input that could influence the decisions that are made even after demolition or zoning or whatever.
That's true, but I think
And
I don't think that happened. I don't think their real piece happens here. I think it happens at other locations.
It does, but their initial
Yeah.
concerns happened at the supervisors meeting. So
Yeah.
they did bring that
So
up,
question-
and that wasn't the right venue either, but
Yeah,
Jump in as soon as you can.
that's,
So,
can't hurt.
so question about our role in that decision on demolition.
Yeah.
So we've been told that our limit is the exterior of the historic properties. Is that the same in a demolition discussion? Because they want to show us pictures of the inside. for
Well, I
exhibits
think if
to-
they come in and show the pictures of the inside and say, this is not feasible to, I mean, we
Yeah,
have,
it plays to feasibility.
it does play the feasibility of keeping it. If the exterior of the building is solid, let's say, and I think Frank thinks it's probably solid,
Yeah.
having
Right.
looked at it from the outside. But the inside is a complete gut and would be, and they could show that to fix the inside would be insurmountable
Mhm.
for the type of building, then I think you have a potential of coming back and saying, we think the outside has value, but we understand that what's on the inside makes it very hard for that to be salvageable.
Okay.
But the other
Fine
thing that go ahead.
It's a fine line, because I could argue that a perfectly intact antique house is financially not viable for any modern use, even if nothing needed to be done. So.
But I think if you come back and somebody says it's gonna cost, so let's say the value of the home is $500,000. I know they're marketing it differently, but let's say the value of the home is $500,000. But it's gonna cost me $700,000 to
Right.
do the interior of their home. You probably you're not going to increase the value enough to justify spending $700,000 just on the interior of the home.
Right.
Well, that's unfortunately the old house game.
Yeah,
Any old house you renovate is gonna cost probably more than you're ever gonna recover.
well, and
I
Well,
think,
you know, I
I
mean,
think,
the
I
size
think,
of their
I
lot,
think we
that
understand
could
that our
be
role
recovered.
is to advocate for a logical reuse.
yeah,
But we're also not gonna overlook the fact that this is one of the oldest houses in the township. And it's in a prominent location.
It won't be financially feasible to renovate the inside of the house because it has a lousy layout. And so it won't be
reuse
usable.
is-
The numbers
Yeah,
game
limited.
the numbers game on anything that needs to be rehabbed is gonna be a losing perspective.
Yeah.
Especially in a location like this where there's a high dollar value if you can switch it to commercial.
well, and the other
Or
piece
subdivide the lot.
too that I would say is,
Mhm.
I think there's some things that you should consider. In regards to, I know there's some, I just saw it recently, there's somebody that's doing like a recording of the building. And they're like, I think they're doing some drone footage and things like that, that actually, if it does come down, like, potentially if somebody's gonna do a demolition and even if you're not necessarily for it, but maybe what you'd come back and say is one of the things that should be done is that a plaque be put into place and that the drone footage be done and put out on the internet so that people could see what the value was of what that house was at the time. So there are some things that I just read this recently of the ability to do this. Somebody sent it to me. Maybe one of you did, I don't know, but I got this whole thing that
We're
there's-
doing it at the, Porsche, is it Ferrari, wherever they're building there, for the Kirk, they're gonna put up a plaque
yeah.
on the space telling about the family, Kirk family and the Chevrolet.
But-
So that's how they do that, and they record it.
Yeah, so there's some ways to, but there's like, you can actually do some photos of the existing, the way it is, and pick up some stuff that would help to preserve something that may end up going away, is my point.
Assuming you are able to review the property,
Mark,
give me a general idea of like the size and layout of it.
Okay.
Cause I'll take a look at other similar houses along the pike that are being used for businesses.
it had
See if
two
it's-
entrances
see if it's
in the
anything-
front.
See if
Yeah.
it's
Divided
comparable
into
layout.
like two houses. When you go
They were
inside.
designed, that was the
That was the
German
design.
double door
And
farmhouse,
it's-
that's why.
I know, but it is actually two separate, like that, a dividing wall in between
Yeah.
the two.
Well, he did that
Somebody
because he was
opened
a
them up so
dentist.
you could go from one to the other, but that's what it was. It was like,
But that was part of its
Horrible layout.
history
it was
because
okay
there,
when it was a house and there's only 4 people in Newtown Square and 3 of them didn't care what they built there. But it's a lousy layout for,
Okay, so I'll make sure you have my email before you go. If you could just send me a little note on
okay.
what you found, what the general size is,
My
how
daughter-
it lays out once you walk in the doors.
and consider also that this house, I know in our ordinance, it does say to offer alternatives and educate. Never went on the market. It was done between the deceased owner's family and the property owner for a fairly low, I think it was 400,000, something like that. So it never had an opportunity for anyone with historic interest to ever see it. And that person, I think, I don't know if they withdrew for that, but had been considering converting that to a second restaurant and having the first one kind of, I was told, like the Marshallton, where you have the pub on the one side and a restaurant. So there was all these things being thrown around that were maintaining it with maintaining it and just redoing, reconfiguring the inside.
To renovate that building into a restaurant would be
Well, I'm just saying,
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
right, and they bought it for a very low
You
price,
could-
so.
You know, they.
But someone else could. I mean, something else could be done
Yeah,
with it.
If you're starting out with $1 million and trying to go broke.
But if you do adaptive reuse, which
Yeah.
would be the purpose of it, there'd be open for options. It happened that that never occurred.
Yeah, the
There
guy
were no
bought it as soon
options.
as-
Nobody else got a chance. Nobody else got to see that or see,
That's, a real estate lady would say, that's quick sale. Boom. They sold it and that's it.
So Steve, if this, using this house as an example, this was never declared officially historical, et cetera, but the township knew it was historic, it was on the list, you know. Would the process be, if it came for permits, et cetera, and they said they were gonna demolish the house, okay, remember, we didn't even know about it. Would the township automatically bring it to the attention of this commission to view it as a historical house, even though we didn't know until they were ready to demolish it? Would they bring it to our attention?
If I hear what I think you're asking me is if we didn't know it was historic and.
No, you did know it's historical, but you got a permit to demolish it. Would it come to this commission that says, well, hey, a
If
historical
it's,
house
if it's
gonna be-"
listed as a class 1, class 2 resource, our ordinance says it has to come here first before it can be demolished.
But if it
But if it
weren't,
wasn't,
and we didn't have an application
if,
in,
if we hadn't put it through the process and if it was just on the 1984 list, so we knew about it, but we didn't have it in our thing. then they have
I
been
mean,
letting us
Andy
know.
has taken the approach, and it's a little bit broad, that if it was on the list that was originally listed as historic values in the township, I think from the county, that list, I think he's using that as a basis to send things here
Okay.
first. It is not the requirement of our ordinance, the way the ordinance is written. And if the person fights it, I don't know that we could totally uphold it, but we are trying to give an opportunity for you all to give suggestions that might be able to keep historic properties in the town.
like with the Ellis buildings with the hair salon and the
Yeah.
florist.
Yeah, that's another good example of some
Right.
ways that we looked. I mean, they weren't gonna tear those down.
No,
There was
no,
no
yeah.
intention, but we're looking for opportunities to obviously save historic resources that are in the town.
Okay, so hopefully it would be, we never knew about it, and they were about to knock it down. It would be brought to the attention of this commission to.
Yeah.
I think if somebody fought it, we would potentially not be able to make them do it, but that would be the place where we would be.
Okay, thanks. All right, do we want to move on to new business?
Mhm.
Yep.
All right, then I will cede the discussion and possible action on the certified local government program to Kathy.
I just wanted an update on whether you had been able to look at the application
I looked at it quickly. It looks like we should move forward. I think there's a couple things I'm not sure that we totally qualify on, but I think that when you looked at it, did you think we qualified on everything?
I went, item by item with the, Pennsylvania Historic Museum
Yep.
Commission representative. And anything that was iffy, and I think it might have been that we didn't have an architect on our board.
Yeah, I think
But
that
there,
was.
what she said, then when I called her, but there was, other than that, we were pretty good. And she said that if you're working on it, or there doesn't happen to be one in your town, that won't stop them from. doing
Okay,
it.
well, I
They're
mean,
not deal breakers, in other
well,
words,
here would be my comment. The worst thing can happen is they tell us no,
And then.
and then we would know what it is that we need to
Right.
work
And
on.
She said if you want her to, she can look at it before you even turn it in.
Okay, well, then I think we ought to go ahead and, I think if the board's in agreement, our board of supervisors, I think we just want to make sure they're in agreement, but I
Okay.
think we should move forward. I don't see why they wouldn't be, but I just
Don't
want
either.
to, I just want to make sure that they're,
Okay,
So
they're
are
at least up on it, that you're applying for it.
So are we saying that you're gonna talk to the supervisors and we're gonna motion to push it forward?
Yeah, I think it
next
would come
time?
out of here, make a recommendation to go before the supervisors, ask for, just tell them that this is what you're wanting to do, and make sure there's no objection, and then move forward.
Okay.
And we can either have one of you do it, or I can bring it up under my manager's report, and we can just do it that way.
because you're doing the filing of the application.
Well, I think that basically, I would work with somebody
That
from
would
here to
probably
fill
be-
out the application and
But
then.
that, you doing, I think that would be
Yeah.
smoother.
Yeah,
smoother.
Yeah.
Okay. Good thing we're down one person on the committee. We could find an architect.
Yeah,
Start
that's
lobbying.
true.
Start lobbying like, hey, you're an architect. Guess what we have available for you?
but does it an architect or does it need to be a historic architect?
It's a story.
I think it's a historic
And
architect.
I have several, they just don't live
Live in
in
the
the
community.
square.
And so that would be a question for the board. That
They
was
have
one
to
of the
look.
things that I was thinking about, that we would have to have a question from the board. Would the board allow a non-resident to serve on the board? And maybe the idea was the non-resident could serve, but may not be a voting member. I don't know. So I haven't,
Okay.
those
that's
those
another
were some of
thing.
my initial
That's a good
thoughts.
idea, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how I don't know how an architect who's volunteering would feel about that, I mean, they may feel like, why am I volunteering if I don't have a vote? But, it's always a little bit of a question, do you have somebody from outside of your community have a right to vote on things that are happening inside of your community?
Right.
So that, what's their same investment? Other than, obviously, a historic architect most likely would most likely vote in favor of what you all felt was the direction you wanted to head. I would think most of them would, but that would be my only question. I
And they
don't,
may go with it as an advisory, as you're saying, without a vote. They may
Yeah.
think that's fine too.
yeah,
Or
I-
not even, or say that the inspector and
yeah.
renovator, that Frank is sufficient, so.
So we just have to work through that, but that would be the one piece that if we're
Okay.
going to the board to ask for that change, then that's one of those
Okay.
things that we'd have to figure out.
On a side note to that, if we're gonna be asking the question of can we get a qualified expert who's not a resident on the board? It might also be interesting to know, are there other circumstances where a non-resident with a vested interest could join the board, such as a property owner in the township who resides in another township?
Yeah, I would argue if it's a property owner, they probably could.
They can't the way our ordinance is written, because it's
Yeah.
resident only.
Oh, resident, it says, okay, I thought it said
I'm
owner.
that's one that has always driven me batty, because I ran into that situation in Haverford.
Yeah.
Where I can't join because I'm not a resident, even though I own a
Yeah,
property there. So if we're approaching that topic, we might as well, we might
Maybe
as
we
well
can look
consider
at both
both
of
questions at once.
Yeah.
Because then we would know whether we needed to amend the charter once or twice. All right. Are we good on this topic for tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Then 8.2 is discussion of current deterrents to demolition within the code. And is it possible to strengthen them, or does that need to be done through a different code? And you would probably know best what we could do to investigate whether. Because I think our understanding is there's not a lot of deterrence in our code to demolition. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of deterrence in the zoning code to demolition other than a cooling off period.
Yeah, I think the cooling off period is the deterrence, but it's a pretty limited deterrence. I think if you wanted more teeth to it, you need to really work with the board of supervisors to determine if they're willing to have more teeth to it. Because the ordinance was written the way it was written because that's how where they felt like they wanted that to be. I think that if you're wanting something different, you need to petition the board and how and why you would want something different.
Would it be the board of supervisors only, or would it be the supervisors and zoning?
Well, I think if you're changing the ordinance, it's only the board of supervisors. It would go, if we change the ordinance because it's a zoning ordinance, the zoning hearing board only hears and makes determinations. Think about the zoning hearing board being the judge.
Okay,
The judge doesn't get to set the law.
okay,
Okay, they just get to determine how the law is interpreted and carried out, right? That's kind of what they do. They say, yes, we think this is what the law is saying. But the planning commission does have a role when we change a zoning ordinance. The planning commission has a hearing just like the board of supervisors. And the planning commission doesn't have a vote necessarily, but they do get to give a recommendation for approval or not approval of it.
I have a suspicion what that recommendation would be.
Yeah.
So perhaps this is something that we
Well,
think about and
I just,
discuss a best way to approach it politically.
the current, when I wrote Andrew about 3201, the zoning in our regular code. First off, we have no penalties. The ordinance doesn't have a violation or penalty section, so we don't. Zoning section 172 to 155 requires a permit when such activities occur. If someone fails to obtain a demolition permit for any structure or building, we would use this section. So basically, you don't focus just on historic because they don't even have one that's strong for any person who demolishes. And then, oops. It says a civil complaint will be filed with the district court and the owner is subject to fines not to exceed $500 a day plus the costs of prosecution, which could be, okay, how many days? So it is, and that's for the general person who just knocks down my house and I didn't get a permit for. So there is none within the code. So it would be a larger thing than just the historic buildings code.
Do we want to kind of go away as individuals and do a little research on this and kind of think, what would we like? And then discuss it again next month and then discuss how we might petition to see if that might be something that the supervisors would support?
Well, I'd be curious to find out why there was, yes, what would be the
Because
rationale
right
for
now, I
not
don't-
having strong
Right
penalties?
right now,
for
today, I
someone
don't know that
who
we would have that
demolishes
recommendation.
without getting a permit.
Well, isn't the challenge that,
There's whole articles written on that, that's what I'm saying.
right, because, I mean, so the ordinance set, like, okay, so if it's not listed as a class 1 or class 2, and someone wants to demolish it in this case, and we make a suggestion that they don't, and we give them alternatives, and they say no, and demolish it anyway, what would give us the right to give them stronger deterrents? They're not on the resource, we haven't.
Because
we
you
just don't want them to.
demolishing without a permit should have a penalty.
Right, no, but if they have the permit and we just.
Oh, well,
Oh, no,
yeah, if they
you-
got the permit, that's what we're not talking
Right.
about having the permit. We're
Okay.
talking about if you don't have the permit. Let's give a hypothetical. You
Well,
put
no,
the
no, no,
permit
no,
in.
no, I understand, I'm just asking.
No, I'm saying with this
Yeah.
property 3201, which is why it comes up. You put in a permit and then you see, ooh, I have to go through this and I go through that and then there's a 90-day.
Mhm.
So, are the penalties worth taking on if I just knock this down on a weekend and then say, oh, like what
that doesn't-
outweighs the difference? It's been done. It was done all along the reservoir. If you know where off was, all the trees and everything was cut down on a weekend. So that does happen
Mm.
without permits, and that was in Marple. And so those kinds of things happen because the penalties aren't enough.
Okay.
So it's like, I'll take the penalty. Oh, what, it's $5,000? I just, or it's, does this make sense? If the
No, I hear you.
penalties,
Yeah.
and because if you look at it, we have whole articles
I
written
think,
about
I
that.
think what you're saying is our penalties right now could be construed as a cost of doing business.
And
Yeah, it
we
doesn't-
are limited in what we can do. We can't, I mean, some of our penalties are set because that's what state law allows.
Mhm.
And I mean, like, for example, most of our zoning fines and most of our citation fines are set not to exceed $1,000 because the state does not allow us to exceed $1,000. I will tell you, when you go to court, the judge rarely sets the penalty at $1,000. They usually knock it down to some small amount, and particularly if it's a first time offense. So I've not known of a time where $1,000 was upheld, because the judge has freedom to decide on what the penalty is.
And in today's day and age, that's the cost of bringing the bulldozer out to do it.
Yeah,
Nothing.
Would a penalty such as you've got a building, okay, but it's also on historic land. So if you knock the building down, okay, you got away with that, but it's historic land and you can't build on historic land forever or for 10 years or something. So if you knock the building down, the land is still
I
historic.
think we would
Without a
lose that in court. I really do. I can't imagine the court would uphold if we put something like that in place. Because now we are basically condemning the property.
No, it's historic land.
Now you're condemning the property. And so when you as a township, or we as a township say, you can't do something on your land, we basically have condemned the property to a certain level. And so we have to be very careful. Like there's things we can do. We can say it's zoned because of it's near, it's zoned residential. We can say that you have to have this much to do commercial. We can do those kind of things. But you can't come in and say you can't build for 10 years, I don't think. I mean, we can look at it, but everything I know about land law, which is this much, compared to what the vast amount is, but the smell test tells me that wouldn't work.
Okay.
I'll check with the
That much,
solicitor.
I know this much, so you're way ahead of me.
So when we were going through all these different instances of where they have different rules, they were for historic districts or historic homes. So if you separate that out and you incorporate that into your ordinance without affecting the rest of the general population ordinance, the regular code, which is what most of these did, they could then halt redevelopment for 2 years. They have all these penalties that they put in place.
You're talking about the article.
And they're all different places in
An
the
article-
country.
An interesting article to read.
Sure, I'll give it to me.
But, so yeah, I'm thinking it has to be
Oh, thank you.
directed towards historic.
Yeah, I mean, it
And a
sure can't
special
be
thing
in
for
general.
us, yeah. For our ordinance.
Do we want to discuss this again, or what do we want to do with this?
And the other thing to remember, and I'll read this, but just the other thing to remember is what happens in some states have different laws than Pennsylvania, so you have to also take it into account of what Pennsylvania.
No, that's Louisiana. And
I was looking,
Yeah.
that was my first notice here,
Wisconsin.
was that it wasn't Pennsylvania.
Right.
They're all different places, yeah.
Yeah. But I'll look at it, and
But
the thing is, we may need to, if we want to strengthen, sometimes the way to strengthen is to go to the state level to strengthen. And because the state law can be the state is what controls what laws the local municipality can put in place.
so, yeah, we'll follow up, I can talk to
I'd like-
the Pennsylvania State.
You do that.
Historic
I'll
Museum
reach out
Commission.
to maybe Haverford and see what their limits are and what their procedure is. Because I believe they're stricter than us. So
They
I'd
are,
like to
but-
know.
and you make sure you frame it with it's illegal demolition.
I know that
it would be
I know they're a
demo-
different township structure, but it might give us some parameters of what
But there
different
could
people are
be,
doing.
yeah, I mean, that could be many, it could be alterations, anything you didn't get a permit for that you did.
Hmm.
Um,
All right. This one is you two as well, Kathy.
What is
Discussion and possible actions of historic property
Oh.
designation guidelines, booklets, yeah.
Well, I was reading through this, I received, and I think it's going to be updated. This is the Delaware County Design Guidelines, a template for municipalities. And basically, it's all about recommendations for when you're going to renovate, do any kind of work on a certain type of home. It just gives recommendations, like how to replace, repair, spacing between houses. It's really well done. I think they're going to do another one, so I'm going to,
Who's that from?
the county, planning commission.
Oh, okay.
It's part of their historic, goes into windows and doors, all that, because it's 2012, I think they're going to redo it, but let me find out if it's something, I think that's part of the application process, and that's why she sent it to me, that we have some kind of guidelines. And you're basically just informing people what to do, so it's not saying you must do this if you have a historic house. We never want to say people, so.
Something you will provide to new resource.
Well, I think what I
people,
would,
or is it-
I'm not sure how we would do it if we get an updated, or if we use this one, I just change, it's not Delaware County, it's gonna be us.
Okay, I didn't know. if it was
Well,
something-
what you could, what you can also
Design
do
guidelines, it would say.
is you could suggest that we adopt the Delaware County's guidelines, and then if they update it,
Yes,
then you have the
Okay.
current update, and you don't have to list it as the specific one.
Would that be a motion that we'd want to add to the ordinance?
Let me find out whether it needs to be in the ordinance or whether you can do just that as a policy that you all use within.
right, because you know what, with your, it's kind of like including historic preservation in the strategic plan.
Yeah, I'm
It's more
thinking,
like we have a thing of guidelines in our
yeah,
plan.
I
Yeah.
see it. I think it could be easier to implement than having to go through the ordinance, but let me find out.
Stop doing that.
Would that be something that we'd have to bring back up
Yes,
and make a
I'll follow
motion
up
on?
again.
Well, no, I mean,
Well-
like, would we have to decide exactly what we wanted to do and then make a motion for the group to
Yeah.
approve it?
So here's what I think will probably happen. This is my gut telling me how to go
Yeah.
through this. If we don't have to take it back and make it part of the ordinance, it's probably would be something that you all would recommend. You would make the recommendation to the board of supervisors to pass this as their guidelines for historic preservation. And then the board would go ahead and do it potentially by resolution. And then it would become set that way. That's like kind of thinking what makes it official.
Okay,
That would be how we make it official, because I don't think you have the authority to make it official on your own. I think it has to go back to the board of supervisors. And that's me, if I read your ordinance again, I may find there's somewhere where you have that authority. I just don't recall that being in there.
I don't think we do. That's why I thought, if it was going to be like a official
Yeah.
guidelines that homeowners had to, or the township had to follow. But if it's a policy, because it's a recommendation, I think that's a more gentler way.
Yeah, let me just find out.
Yeah.
okay, and yeah, I'll also look for this in PDF, because I'm sure they're gonna want to read it before,
Oh, yeah.
they're gonna
And
have
if
to
it's
look
in
through it.
PDF, we can add it to the
Mhm.
township website with like a link with the
Right,
ordinance or something.
that's what it's actually probably intended to be.
Yeah, be good. Okay.
All right, moving on to old business.
So I rewrote, so going back to the welcome letter for homeowners, did everyone get a chance to read that?
I have two questions.
Yeah.
Okay, under permitted uses and approval factors.
Mhm.
I just didn't know what a cultural studio was, so. See where it says second line there,
Mhm.
cultural studios? I've never heard of it, that's all. Could be just me.
So this was taken out of the ordinance,
Oh, okay, well,
so.
then the ordinance, and it's gotta be good, all right.
Says that?
I mean, I
would
I
think that
took
would
this
be
out
like-
of our ordinance.
That's fine.
so-
I would think that would be like the permitted adaptive reuse I have.
It is,
for-
yeah,
for an
permitted
artistic
uses and
studio.
approval factors, cultural studio, I don't, you know,
Yeah, they mean
Painting,
artistic
photography,
art
yeah.
studios.
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
and they're trying to cover all artistic probably. but-
yeah.
that's fine, that's fine. And then under, if you go down a couple more paragraphs, application process and additional considerations, kind of that second to the last line there, neglecting the historic resource is prohibited. And then
Mhm.
my question is, how is it prohibitive? And if this came out in ordinance, then it's fine too.
That is what we were just talking about, the ordinance, just saying like, you're not permitted to neglect the home, like demolition by neglect. That isn't permitted, but what's the recourse to it?
Okay,
That would be back to,
We can say no, but
What,
there's nothing the ordinance can do about it.
all right, it just,
well, the township can though, right?
town-
But the
Yeah,
I mean,
township,
we
if it's
can, we can,
ordinance,
we can
that's it.
apply, like, for example, the situation that's happening at 3201, the porch,
Right.
you know, we can force them to fix it or to take it off, but I can't. I mean, we're limited even then, you know, they have to do something. And I can fine them for not doing something, but if they want to take it down, it's really hard to say you can't take it down.
Now, remember, this is specific to a property that has been
Been-
added to the class 2 resource.
Yeah, once it's added, then there's
And that
protection.
would be under the assumption that it is in great condition to begin with, and everyone's happy, and,
Okay.
you know, now it's just your responsibility is not to neglect it.
okay, that's fine. I just didn't know whether this is too strong of language or you
Mm.
got it from somewhere or something.
This was
It's,
taken.
it's again
directly-
out of the ordinance.
Oh, again,
Yeah.
great, well written, okay, I love it.
Yes, AI is a fantastic tool.
Okay.
I suggest everyone try it.
And since these are in the other, that was my, they.
Yeah, I-
Applied all 3 letters.
They do. I literally just updated the first couple of paragraphs to address the proper recipient. So you've got the realtor agent, the homeowner when designated, and then the new homeowner, which I just lost. So like if someone bought a property that, you have the new homeowner, bought the
yes.
property that is already on the resource.
did we
list.
determine how we're managing these?
So I emailed Heather, for our, we go to the meeting note. mm, 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 mm. Anyway, so I emailed Heather. Heather said that she was going to ask who updates the website because she's not clear on that. And I think what we talked about, I know I wrote it in here somewhere. I think what we talked about was if it is on the resource, then,
Did we
Um,
flag to transfer?
right.
Okay.
And that was something that if.
I mean,
it
it's
comes
not like
up
we
on
don't,
the
it's not like we don't
MLS
hear
or-
about these things, but
Right,
it would be better
but
to
there's
have
so few
an
of them.
automated
it's-
process.
Yeah, it's so few of them right now that it's a manageable thing by the township.
Yeah, when designated is easy because we generally
Right.
know when that happens.
Right, and
New
then,
homeowner,
and then it goes on the market and then it's purchased, right?
We're
So
looking at updating our software to
Okay.
something that, like, when it comes up that it's a historic resource, it'll flash red or something when it comes up.
honestly, I think the listing one is the hardest
Mhm,
because you don't necessarily have to apply to the township to list.
mhm. That's why we have Donna.
That's why we have Donna.
Mhm.
Also, we see signs.
Oh, yeah, I know, like 3502 Goshen Road. Did you see that?
If we know they're there, okay.
No. And I did receive a call from a
Smedley-
realtor that
Smedley
actually,
Butler,
yes, that went
yeah.
up for sale. But someone actually called me a realtor on a property that she investigated was historic. She actually knew the name. It was the Ashley Spring House and is on our list or historic, the long list.
Bridmore Avenue?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
that-
it's
it's been-
listed as
it's been up for about a
nineteen
month.
fifty on on the realtors for sale. And she knew it wasn't 1950. One piece of it wasn't even 1950, it was 1980.
I think there's a sign that gives it away.
No, she had called me to ask because it's nowhere on it mentions that it's historic spring house, which is
I thought-
intact and
I
on the
thought-
building,
I
it's the
thought they had a
house.
marker.
I don't know if they do.
Or maybe it's just that I've seen it on our,
You've
It's on
seen
the
it.
historic,
Oh, yeah, it's
it's
on the
on-
one
it's on
that
your
has
website.
everything on it,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah, I've been kind of watching for a, open house.
But she
It's right on,
looked,
it's right on the end of my road.
well, it's two, think of it as two places conjoined, because the one is new and one is old.
but anyway, they're not on the historic.
No, it
list
wasn't,
yet, so
and-
they
and-
do not
and
need
to
to
be
get a
honest,
letter.
Whatever, yes, whatever they want to do.
What's crazy is I literally just read from your book that you put together about the Smedley Butler
Yes.
family, that they had, this was the second home that they purchased, and they're like, oh no, should we? But they felt compelled. I
Yes,
was like, and now they're selling it, but I guess they felt compelled to no
is
longer.
that third one in the book? Is that the third one?
No, it's further in the back.
No, third one that sold since I
Um,
told the stories of how much they loved them, and how much they did, and told that they were, and then they sold them. That is the third one. It was Lewis, that one, and
Uh-huh.
William Lewis house.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to.
So-
that
derail.
is funny though.
So are we
we-
making a motion?
Yeah, I was gonna say, are we at the point to make a motion, and is the motion to present it to the township for approval, or is it the motion to make it our official letter?
Does the Board of Supervisors need to approve the letters?
Let me really quick, my initial thought is no.
Okay.
But let me take a really quick look and make sure that, because looking at the letter, I don't see anything in it other than just informing people of
Right.
information. So I don't think it's a problem.
Right.
But what I'll probably do is run it by your liaison,
Mhm.
just to make sure she's reviewed it, and then we'll go from there.
And then we would make a motion to it,
Oh, no, you can make a motion,
Okay.
and you can make the motion contingent upon
the liaison.
the liaison approving.
Yeah, because I assume it's gonna be managed, or at least
Are you gonna call for
Set
a
out.
motion?
I will call for a motion. I assume it's gonna be sent out by the township, not by us, though.
Mhm.
All right. Who's making the motion? Or-
I'll make a motion
All right.
to
can-
approve the letters to be sent out on contention that the liaison approves.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I as well.
Perfect.
And then we'll revisit this next month to see where we stand with
Mhm.
whatever needed to be done at the township.
So if I could get you to just send me those separately in an email,
I will.
and then that way I can forward them to the liaison
Yeah.
for review. And so how are you wanting staff, if you're expecting staff to do this? I'm not saying we won't, I'm just trying to figure out how staff's supposed to know who we're sending these to.
Well, either we could prep it and send it to the staff, or it could be something that we figure out how, when a flag comes up.
Yeah, I just need to know what I need to know what the triggers are. Because
Don't
staff
have-
will do what we need to do, it's
That's
just,
what the process is under these circumstances when, so we know the first one is easy, right? So the class 2,
yeah, once it's a class 2 resource, to send it out,
That's
once
an
it's
easy
approved,
one.
that's easy.
right?
Well,
But
I don't know what the
next
process
step, the
is.
next two are the ones I'm more concerned about,
Yeah,
because typically we don't get notified until there's a buyer.
mhm.
well,
on
and
a
we wouldn't
house.
need to send it out until there was a buyer.
But for the realtor, I think that's the only
Well,
one.
the realtor, I thought the whole idea
The
was.
realtor, we probably are gonna have to do legwork.
Mhm.
I think for the realtor one, it's almost gonna have to come from us to you,
Okay,
because it's not something you're gonna be notified, the township's gonna be notified on.
well, that's my point. I don't know how
Yeah.
we would know. That's why I'm trying.
Right.
It's fine if I have a trigger point, that's easy.
Mhm.
It's easy when when the board approves it, we're gonna now send a
Yeah,
letter. That's
once
easy.
it goes up for sale, if the
Yeah.
township is not involved in that process whatsoever, I think
That's
makes
the
sense
tough
for it to
part.
come from us
Why don't we
because we
ask-
know.
Why don't we ask Donna if there's a way for her to set up a system that flags specific properties when they hit the MLS.
Okay.
Because the MLS will probably be notified for most of them.
Yeah.
And she's gonna be in a better position to see those as they pop up than we are.
Right.
You'll have certain cases like 3201 that never hit the MLS. And commercial properties may not, but for all the residentials,
The problem that we have in this town is that many of the historic homes have plaques. So right from the get-go, the person walks and they says, oh, this is historic, but they're not yet listed. So I get phone calls at the Historic Society. for
I know,
all
but we're
of
just
those.
talking about the ones that are listed.
No, but I'm saying so far, most of them just call the Historic Society.
Yeah, well, like
well, that could
like
be
we
another.
said, we'll know that the listings, you will know that the listings, Donna will probably know that it's listed, so.
So then that
I
just,
think among
but then they're
all of
gonna
us.
say, so now I need to reference someone to give me answers to all these questions. This is what I'm saying. There's a ton of questions they're gonna ask
Uh-huh.
about that's just starting the tip of the iceberg. It's like, okay, now we have this letter, but I'm now gonna call and I need someone to answer these questions.
So who do you want them calling?
That's the problem.
So it says at the bottom here, should your prospective buyer have any questions or need further assistance, they can visit the website on the township, which leads them to the township, but also leads them to the ordinance. You know,
Yeah, and so many, there aren't that many I think the Historic Society is pretty good for answering the questions they want to know
Mhm.
about the house or the history or why it's on it. But now they want it, when they want to know about alterations
mhm.
Is
and
there a
what they're
township,
able to do before they purchase it.
is there a township contact on our website?
Yes.
Then that's who's gonna get the flag.
It'll be code.
Hmm.
The code people, they would have to talk to somebody, potential
don't know.
buyer, and
Yeah,
it says,
but
I want to do this to this house. Under your ordinance, can I do
Oh,
that?
yeah, well, that's fine.
And that's what they're mostly asking.
Okay, that's normal.
And I
think that
usually
makes- I
refer
think that makes sense for them to.
to do that, yes.
But yeah.
Well, we can certainly,
Right now
we
they're
can certainly
calling all over the
flesh this
place.
out as we're, as
Yeah.
we're getting things.
Yeah, I mean, if we need to add another, like, you know, specifically call this number, or you're gonna call this department within the township, I mean, the more information we give them on who to contact, the better anyway.
And we
And there
can
could
see
be-
what other
and there-
townships do too.
There could be a simple fourth letter that's congratulations on your interest in a historic property.
Well, this is why we have the realtor have it, so they know, oh, we're gonna contact here, and we're, you know, here's who you would contact because it's a historic property, here's who. They all have the answers for what you can do with the property. The education.
So many questions.
Yeah.
There's so much education that needs to be done within the township, not just the community.
Okay.
I think my only concern is if the anticipation is that the staff is going to be able to answer a lot of historic questions, they're not.
Well, not the staff in general, but I mean, if they were to say, you know, I'm gonna need, will I need a permit to do this?
That question we can answer. I think
That's,
my concern is if they go from asking questions that are procedural questions, we'll answer procedural questions all day long because that's what we do. But
that's what they.
going to like, am I allowed to do this on the property when it's an exterior piece? We're gonna say, no, you have to go through to this, but if
Mhm.
they start getting into some certain details,
Yeah,
our staff is not gonna know that.
so Kathy, would you be able to, and I know this is more work on you, but I mean, from your experience of what questions people ask you, would you be able to put together an FAQ?
Yeah, but I'm just gonna, but most of them are related to the, code for exterior changes. So even though they do want to know history, they never want that till they're buying it. And then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, tell me about it. Really, what they want to know is, are you going to restrict me on what I want to do to the outside of this
Yeah.
house? And what does your ordinance restrict? Because I'm not sure I want to buy this house if it's too restrictive. So I usually allay their fears by explaining it, directing them to the ordinance.
Well, I mean, if
And then,
that's-
so that's pretty much
So if,
what
That
it
part,
is.
the township staff can answer.
Mhm,
Yeah.
and that's most of them.
Okay.
and if not,
That's why I
I mean,
usually send them to Andrew.
I mean, if not, I mean, I don't know why, if the township wouldn't be opposed to having, you know, like an FAQ or just a distilled
Absolutely.
on the historic preservation page,
Mhm.
you know?
If
Just, I
you want to
think,
come up with a
small
list of
bites.
frequently asked questions, we
Yes,
will
why don't
put
we do
that
that?
on there.
Because they don't
That's
want to
not a
read that whole
problem. We would
ordinance.
love to
They
do
really
that.
I don't want to read the whole.
No,
ordinance
they
either.
don't
I
either.
know,
They-
but
and
neither
I
do
always
we.
refer
Like,
them,
people
yeah.
don't like to read, that's just a given.
But if it's
Frequently asked
there,
questions.
even if it's there, like if you have a way that you want us to answer
Yes.
that you think is better than what we might, you got to remember, if they, depending on who they talk to, will depending on the answer they get. I would like to say every person in the office always answers the same way.
Obviously.
Obviously, that doesn't happen, right? So if we want a particular way of things answered, what I have suggested from other groups, and I suggested here, is if you do frequently asked questions
Mhm.
and you give us answers, I have told my staff, read that answer. Go to the website and pull that answer up. That is your official answer. Don't elaborate more, don't elaborate less. If that's what you want,
Yep.
we can do that. And we can put that kind of set of answers together so that it's consistent all the time.
Shall we add a discussion for next meeting?
I did.
Frequently answered questions?
Frequently asked questions.
Perfect.
I mean, I
So-
can't tell you how
so
many of those and best practice
If we
guide.
all just kind of, like write down what we,
Mhm.
Mhm.
what we see, then we can come up with a list of maybe 5 to 7 questions that we can create answers for and,
That's good.
all right.
Yep.
Is there anything else we wanted to discuss today? We have a question for Steve.
There was one that we had just, you pointed at Steve and you said, I'm gonna ask this at the end. of
Yeah, I
the
know
meeting."
that. I remember the pointing. I just don't remember what the question was.
Oh, a seventh person,
Oh,
because
yes.
we have an even number and we don't have a
Uh,
seventh.
Yeah, I don't know what the board's gonna do with that, so I'll send
Can
it
you
back.
have an even number? You have to have a break, you have to be able to have an.
Right, but they may, let me talk to the board. I don't know what they're gonna do with that.
Okay,
I have several committees right now that have even numbers.
okay.
So we've got, they're looking, I don't know if they have people, so I'll,
Okay.
Maybe they're holding that spot open for your architect.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you would only hope. I don't know.
Do you know who writes really good
All right, so
letters?
it's something that's out there and in consideration, and we'll ask you again next month.
Yep.
Fair enough. Any other
That's all.
questions, or shall we conclude this meeting? I'm gonna motion that we conclude this meeting.
I'm gonna second. the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.